Los Angeles, 1986. Hollywood was burning in a collective nightmare. One of America's most famous adult film stars was discovered to be under 18. Her name was Traci Lords, an angelic face, a seductive body, and the very symbol of the golden age of the adult industry. But that truth shattered an empire built on desire, money, and the pretense of ignorance. Her story wasn't just a scandal, it was a tragedy of fame and innocence. Hollywood created her, worshipped her, and then buried her, all to protect its own image. When the truth came out, everyone rushed to condemn her, forgetting that Traci had only been a child when it all began. A teenage girl lost beneath the lights of an adult world. A world where everything could be bought, even childhood itself. And as every door closed, whispers remained. Was Traci Lords a criminal, or simply a broken product of Hollywood itself?
If stories like this move you, if you believe some voices deserve to be remembered, not erased, stay with us. Hit subscribe so you never miss the hidden chapters behind the fame. Leave a like if you still believe music can tell the truth when the world won't. And share the story, because sometimes reminding others is the only way legends live on. The next chapter of Amy's story begins now.
Before the fame, before the scandal, there was a little girl named Traci Elizabeth Lords, born in 1968, in a place that dreams rarely survive. Steubenville, Ohio. A small, blue-collar town buried in the American Rust Belt, once full of promise, now choking on the dust of forgotten factories. Traci's childhood wasn't filled with movie screens or red carpets. It was filled with shouting, glass breaking, silence that lasted too long. Her father, a heavy drinker, would vanish for days. Her mother, exhausted and broken, tried to keep the family together. But chaos has a way of raising its own children. By age 10, Traci had already learned how to hide bruises. By 12, she was learning how to disappear. She once said in an interview years later, "I grew up believing that love was something you had to pay for, one way or another." When her parents finally divorced, the line between safety and danger blurred completely. The little girl from Ohio packed what she could carry, and ran. First to friends' houses. Then to strangers. Then to anywhere with a locked door. In the late 1970s, America was a country of contradictions. Freedom on TV, fear in the streets. For a runaway teenage girl, it was a hunting ground. And predators could smell innocence faster than blood. At 13, she found herself living with older men, drifting between cities, wearing makeup to look older. She told people she was 18. No one ever asked to see proof. They didn't need to. They wanted to believe the lie. Each time someone told her she was beautiful, she felt seen, if only for a second. And for a girl who grew up invisible, that was enough. But the world she was stepping into wasn't made for survival. It was made for consumption. And soon, Hollywood would find her, and devour her whole. Los Angeles, 1983. The city of angels, and devils in designer suits. Neon lights flicker over Sunset Boulevard, where every dream has a price tag, and every smile hides a transaction. At just 15 years old, Traci Lords arrived with nothing but a fake ID, a new name, and a desperate need to survive. She claimed she was 22. No one questioned it. In Hollywood, beauty is the only passport that matters. She found herself surrounded by photographers, producers, and men who promised to make her famous. One of them introduced her to a photographer for Penthouse. A few weeks later, her face appeared on the magazine's September 1984 issue, distributed to millions of readers around the world. The problem? She was 16. But the industry didn't care. In the world of adult entertainment, ignorance isn't a sin, it's a business model. By 1985, she was starring in films that would make her the most talked about name in the adult world. Over the span of just 2 years, she appeared in more than 100 films and videos, a staggering output that made her one of the top-selling performers of the decade. Her movies generated millions in revenue, and her image was everywhere: posters, video stores, billboards. She became a fantasy, the forbidden face of desire. To the public, she was confident, seductive, untouchable. But behind closed doors, Traci was falling apart. She was still a teenager, hiding behind wigs, makeup, and a carefully rehearsed smile. Her nights were spent alone, surrounded by luxury that didn't feel real, haunted by the question she could never escape. Who am I when the cameras stop rolling? The spotlight that promised salvation became her cage. Every photo shoot, every scene, every interview, another layer of armor, another piece of her innocence stripped away. And yet, the world kept cheering. No one saw the truth hiding in plain sight. The most famous woman in the adult industry was still just a child pretending to be a woman. Soon, that lie would explode, and when it did, it would bring the entire industry to its knees. By 1985, Traci Lords was everywhere. Her face filled magazine racks, her name dominated the video charts, and her image was burned into the minds of millions of men across America. In an industry worth over $8 billion a year, she was its most bankable star, the golden girl of adult cinema. Directors called her the Marilyn Monroe of porn. Video stores couldn't keep her films in stock. Every release sold out within days, and her presence alone could double a movie's sales. In less than 2 years, she had gone from a runaway teenager to the undisputed queen of the adult industry. But beneath the flawless skin and red lipstick, Traci Lords was living a double life. She was barely 17, playing a role written by men twice her age. On set, she was taught to act confident, to flirt, to perform. But between takes, she was just a scared girl, trembling, chain-smoking, whispering to herself that this was only temporary. Those who worked with her later said she had an old soul, that she carried herself like someone far older. What they didn't realize was that trauma ages you faster than time ever could. At the height of her fame, she owned a Mercedes, lived in the Hollywood Hills, and was making more than $5,000 per scene, more than most actors in mainstream television. She smiled for the cameras, partied with producers, and pretended she was in control. But in her diary, she wrote, "Everyone tells me I'm lucky. But luck feels a lot like hell when it never lets you wake up." The industry celebrated her beauty but ignored her pain. She was their product, their profit, their fantasy, not a person. By the end of 1985, Traci had appeared in over 100 adult titles. Every frame, every photo, every whispered line, another brick in the empire built on her illusion. And yet, somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth could not stay buried forever. One secret, one number, her real age, was about to burn Hollywood's most lucrative fantasy to the ground. Summer, 1986. Hollywood woke up to a nightmare it had created, and now couldn't erase. The FBI raided warehouses across Los Angeles, seizing boxes of videotapes, photographs, and production records. The reason, one of the industry's biggest stars, Traci Lords, was underage when nearly all of her films were made. She wasn't 22. She wasn't even 18. She was just 16 when it all began. The revelation hit like a nuclear blast. Every studio, distributor, and store that sold her videos was suddenly facing federal charges for child exploitation. Over 100 adult films were immediately banned, pulled from shelves nationwide. Millions of dollars evaporated overnight. The entire adult film industry, a multi-billion-dollar empire, collapsed under its own guilt. The press devoured the story. Newspapers called it the porn apocalypse. Morning talk shows debated whether she was a manipulative liar or a victim of systemic abuse. The headlines were merciless. Teen star deceives Hollywood. The girl who fooled an industry. But no one asked the right question. Who was really fooled, her, or everyone who looked away? Investigators later revealed that Traci had used a forged passport to enter the business, provided by an older man who acted as her manager. Producers, photographers, and magazine editors had all seen the same ID, and never questioned it. Because in that world, asking questions meant losing money. In the aftermath, Traci disappeared. The woman who had once been everywhere was suddenly nowhere. Friends avoided her. Studios destroyed her footage. Over 80% of the adult films released between 1984 and 1986 had to be recalled because of her involvement. Behind closed doors, men who had made millions off her name were now panicking, shredding contracts, burning negatives, erasing evidence. The industry turned on her instantly, branding her the villain in a story they had all written. But beneath the noise, a darker truth echoed. Traci Lords wasn't the disease. She was the symptom. She wasn't the one who broke the system, she exposed it. As one FBI agent later said, "She didn't destroy the industry. She showed us what it really was." And while Hollywood tried to forget her, Traci was quietly preparing for something no one expected. A comeback, not in shame, but in defiance. After the storm, there was silence. The cameras were gone. The headlines faded. And for the first time in years, Traci Lords was truly alone. At 18, she had already lived through more scandal than most people would in a lifetime. Her fortune was gone, her reputation destroyed, and her name, once worth millions, had become radioactive. Hollywood had erased her. But she refused to disappear. She left Los Angeles, cut her platinum hair, and enrolled in the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in New York City. There, surrounded by aspiring actors half as experienced but twice as innocent, she began to rebuild herself from the ground up. No stage name. No makeup. No pretense. Just Traci. It wasn't easy. Casting directors would whisper when she walked into the room. Some laughed. Others locked the door. One agent told her flat out, "You'll never be anything but that girl from the tapes." But she kept going. In 1990, she landed a small but striking role in John Waters' cult classic, Cry Baby, starring opposite Johnny Depp. It was the first time mainstream Hollywood dared to put her face on screen again. The film grossed over $8 million and became a cult favorite, not because of controversy, but because it was pure rebellion. Traci was reinventing herself, not as a scandal, but as an artist. Throughout the 1990s, she appeared in TV shows like Melrose Place, Profiler, and Gilmore Girls. She released a music album, 1000 Fires, 1995, blending techno and confession, an album critics described as hauntingly self-aware. In 2003, her autobiography, Underneath It All, hit bookstores. It didn't glorify her past. It exposed it. The book became a New York Times bestseller, praised for its brutal honesty. For the first time, the world wasn't staring at her body, they were listening to her voice. The girl they called a scandal had become a survivor. And her survival wasn't quiet, it was art. Because in Hollywood, reinvention is rare. But resurrection? That's almost impossible. Traci Lords did both. Today, Traci Lords stands not as a scandal, but as a survivor. A woman who stared into the darkest parts of fame, and walked back out alive. She's acted in over 60 film and television projects, from Blade to Melrose Place, and built a career many thought impossible. Her autobiography, Underneath It All, has sold hundreds of thousands of copies worldwide, taught in media ethics courses and women's studies classes across the U.S. She speaks at universities, advocates for survivors of exploitation, and uses her story, once weaponized against her, as a warning. Traci Lords is no longer the teenage girl who broke Hollywood. She's the woman who exposed its cracks. In interviews, she often pauses before answering questions about her past. Then she smiles, a quiet, knowing smile, and says, "I was a child who grew up too fast. But I grew up." Her legacy isn't about sex, or scandal, or revenge. It's about ownership, of her body, her story, her truth. And in an industry that still trades innocence for entertainment, that kind of ownership is revolutionary. Nearly 4 decades after the headlines faded, one truth remains. Traci Lords didn't destroy an empire, she revealed it. She showed the cost of silence, the danger of desire without conscience, and the strength it takes to rebuild from ashes. Because in the end, this isn't a story about a girl lost to darkness. It's about the woman who learned to make her own light. Traci Lords, the girl Hollywood wasn't ready for.